Charlotte Rose is an artist heavily influenced by 60s culture and fashion, her work poking fun at the marketing of the era, bringing in familiar imagery and combining it with other cultural icons to create some impactful pop art. Now, with 2 sellout solo exhibitions behind her, she explains how the lockdown had forced her to move away from a successful modelling career into an altogether riskier artistic one. It was a decision that paid off, and now her work is an Enter Gallery favourite. This is Art-Related Noise.
Started experimenting with painting.
There's so many avenues with art.
We're surrounded by images.
Just being lost in this sea of possibility.
Announcing that I was going to be an artist.
It brings the work I do alive even more.
They could be part of this work as well.
Everyone's got their own personal connection to something.
Hello and welcome to Art-Related Noise, the podcast of the Enter Gallery in Brighton. My name's Stuart Holdsworth from Inspiring City, and today I'm with Charlotte Rose. Hi, Charlotte.
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great. No, excited to be in your studio. It's very bright. It's a typical artist's studio. I would say there are paintings everywhere. Can you tell me about this space? What's inside it?
So I've got all my paintings just stacked up against the wall, really. It's a fairly small space considering the scale of paintings that I create. I love it. It's my space, you know. When I first started painting, I was kind of just painting in my living room. So it's nice to have like an actual designated room to paint in. And I've just kind of put up some plastic tarp all over the walls, Dexter style. So I'm trying to keep it, you know, as clean as possible because I'm a bit of a messy painter.
I did notice though that sort of plastic on the walls. I was a bit worried at first coming in. No, I mean, it's quite a small space, but there's a lot going on here. And you're right, you do quite big pieces of work. Your originals certainly are quite large. Is that a conscious decision from you to go quite big?
Yeah, I think when I look for art for myself, I love big pieces, loud pieces, stuff that makes a real big impact. I think my work is a translation of exactly what I like. So, I don't know, I've just always loved and been drawn to larger scale pieces. Even my prints, I try and give the option for the larger scale. So I've got the A1 size and then I've got the size of my originals as well.
Is there something about impact that you're trying to do
there
that you want? Because not only are they quite large in size, they're quite vibrant and colourful.
Yeah, I want my art to smack you in the face.
Well, it does that. I mean, I remember seeing some of the last show that you did, which is Too Much of a Good Thing, I think. And yeah, they were all, they were very impactful. I mean, there's lots of messaging on that artwork, and there's lots of colours and sort of characters as well that are coming out. Can you tell me about that show and what, the work that you created as part of it? Yeah,
so that show was my second show, and I love to introduce an aspect of like satire, lightheartedness, comedy, to my artwork. I'd describe it as pop art. Yeah, large scale. It's about how consumerism is kind of a bit of a lie. So it's like they're trying to be your friend, they're trying to cozy up to you, like if you smoke this brand of cigarettes, you can be like the cowboys or the film stars or, like the oil companies, just being like bright colours, friendly, like Shell being yellow. So one of my favourite pieces is the Guzzle piece. So I've got Daffy Duck covered in oil with the word Guzzle above it and the Shell logo. So again, it's like satirical, but it's also with a serious edge. I introduced some candy branding as well. So I have like the Love Hurts one, which is a play on the Love Hearts branding as well. I'm massively inspired by 1960s branding. So this was like the first age of like consumerism and marketing and the sexiness of branding. And that's my favourite era of branding, so the Marlboro branding.
Where did that come from? Where did that interest come from then? So the 60s and that sort of like, it's sort of like the Mad Men era, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where was that?
So I think I just have an interest in the 60s, like outside of art as well. So in fashion, in like models, like one of my favourite icons is Jane Birkin. Brigitte Bardot, like all these French 60s icons. So I just had an interest anyway, and then I just think it was like a really fashionable, stylish era. And obviously nowadays with cigarette branding being outlawed in the UK and you have this hideous warning on all of the packets, the 1960s branding is the more sexy side of the cigarette era.
Yeah, and I suppose it was quite a lifestyle marketing approach, wasn't it? I mean, very different to now, but they were saying that essentially if you do these things, if you buy this cigarette, if you drink this beer, your life will get better. That's pretty much what it was in the 60s, wasn't
I mean, a lot of my piece, Belladonna Branding, has a lot of real life advertisement from the 60s, and a lot of these adverts were saying if you smoke these cigarettes, you'll get all the girls, or like, you know, it was almost actually saying it was almost healthy for you as well, promoting it in a health way. So it was all about the lie and the twisting of the truth with the branding.
And is this something you think about, you know now? Is that always a constant theme in your work? You're looking at what maybe organisations are saying, the messages that they're putting out there, and you're thinking, even now, you might be thinking, not quite sure about that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely switched me on to a lot of the trickery. Yeah.
And this was your second show, so Too Much of a Good Thing was your second show with Entagal. And your first show, I Quit Last Week, which you did. What was that about?
So over lockdown, I created the body of work, and I was just, I needed something to put my mind towards, and it was a bit of a tough time. So I created this like series of pieces, and then at the end of it, I had enough to create an exhibition. It wasn't my intention to create an exhibition at the start, but I was like, okay, this thing has legs. I invested every single penny that I had into it, and it was a massive risk. And then I ended up selling it out, which was incredible. That was at NoHo Studios, which is the space that I did my second one in as well.
And what was the theme of that work?
Yeah, it was cigarette boxes, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And was that because, I mean, did you have an experience of that yourself? Were you quitting yourself?
Well, yeah, during lockdown I quit. So I quit smoking, but I mean, it was something that I just wanted to do. I don't really know how to... I was just painting because I was like, I needed something to do every single day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, like a job. Having been a model, everything stopped, so I needed like some sort of drive to wake up in the morning, basically. And the cigarette branding I was fascinated with something that was very small and mundane and everyday, and scaling it up massively so that it was in your face and abnormal and interesting. I don't know. I
mean, I did read about that you really only really started during lockdown. That's when you sort of decided to go, right, I'm going to do this thing as being an artist. What was your sort of artistic experience before then? Were you doing much painting, or what was that like?
A little bit. So I come from a family of artists. My mum's an artist and my grandparents are artists as well. So I've always been surrounded by creative people, and my mum has always been painting for as long as I remember. She used to paint murals on my walls as a kid and stuff like that. And I've always been interested in cartoon work. So, I don't know, I used to love like the Beano and reading comic books and stuff like that as a kid. But I never studied art at school. I was kind of encouraged to study more English and more academic subjects. So, in terms of an education, I'm completely self-taught.
And what started was it just like an interest then? So were you interested in those sort of comics, the Beano, the Dandy, I mean, those... Did you used to sketch them out? What got you into the
yeah. Yeah, I used to sketch a lot of them. I remember when I was about 8, I sent in a Dennis the Menace sketch that I did to the Beano and they published it. Like, it's just something that I've always been interested in. And then I think, as a teenager, you kind of lose interest in the things that you love, and you're like sidetracked by life. And then I think I returned to it during lockdown, and it was something that came really naturally to me, and I was like, okay, this is something that I actually do love. I kind of wish that I did study it at university, but there you go.
But since then you seem to have come a long way, because we're sitting in your studio, and again we've joked about you've got all the sort of plastic on the walls, and you've got the big paintings that are just stacked up on the sides, and you've got spray cans in the corner. I can only imagine that in just before lockdown, this room was just like a normal room, right? And it's completely transformed in that.
I mean, I didn't live here.
Oh,
moved.
right, okay, that would explain.
So during lockdown, me and my boyfriend lived in Watford, and I was in my partner's flat, and he's an artist as well, he's a photographer. So he had a lot of paints, spray paints, everything around. Like it was something that was just very easily accessible to me. And his flat, he used to spray paint the walls anyway, so it was a bit of a like artist studio anyway. So during lockdown, I just nailed up some canvases like literally into the wall of our living room and just started painting. I'm really lucky to have Harris, and he encouraged me a lot with my art, and yeah, it was a beautiful thing.
So you started this approach, and then you got connected with Enter. Where did that sort of connection come from?
So my friend Poppy Fawn,
Who has been on the podcast?
yes, she has. She's an incredible artist and has been working with Enter for, I don't know, years now, quite a long time. And I met her through a artist campaign with a jewellery brand called Misoma. They hired 3 artists to kind of show their artwork and do a campaign and a photo shoot. And on that day I met Poppy and we instantly clicked. And then fast forward a couple of months, I had my first exhibition, and she brought Helen and Lindsay along, and they had a look, and thank God they were impressed. And yeah, the rest is history.
Wow, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting, because Poppy is also known for her 60s inspired imagery as well. So I suppose there's a connection there between you two as an artist.
For sure, yeah.
What about the process that you go through for making your work? So you've had a few exhibitions now. I know that you've done some print releases, I think, with Enter. And we've got, as we're speaking, we've got a show coming up at the Truman Brewery in Brick Lane in London. So tell me how you go about making the pieces that you do.
At the moment, I'm sketching out some ideas. So I've got these kind of A4 sized sketches where I sketch them out, and then I'm creating my own cigarette branding for my next body of work. So I'm going to pitch these to Enter Gallery, so hopefully they like them. But yeah, so I sketch them out, paint them. This is done with either watercolour, acrylic, and a bit of gold leaf here. Then I'll show them to Helen and Lindsay, see if they like them. Then I'll scale them up, do them on the big boards. I paint on MDF or plywood, and yeah.
I mean, they're like works of art in their they are works of art in their own right. But yeah, watercolours. It's interesting how you choose to sort of do the sort of the what do you call them? Sketches?
Yeah, like the plans. Yeah.
The plans, yeah. But yeah, with using watercolours and all the sort of vibrancy that I can see there, and these sort of like really soft pastel-y type tones.
I feel like it's a very different style. Like I just kind of do the planning in a kind of softer, more dreamlike watercolor way, and then my originals, like my actual paintings, are like very punchy, bright color, acrylic, spray paint, neons. I'm not really sure I do that. I just think it's an experiment just to see what. I mean, maybe I'll do some of these larger ones in a watercolor way. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting, I suppose, why you've sort of settled on that way to do the design, and then when it's translated, it is very different. It's punchy. I mean, what is this? I mean, are you using spray paint on here as well? Because I'm just looking at one of the pieces that's just behind us. Again, it's a Marlboro cigarette packet, and this is one where actually it says "I quit last week."
Yeah, this is a commission piece. So for this piece, I get my piece of MDF, I prime it with some gesso, and then I do a base coat of like kind of white layering acrylic. So I'll just do some drips, I'll palette knife some on, maybe add a layer of cream just to give it some depth. And then I go in with this one I've done with gold leaf. So get some gilding glue, paint it out, let it dry, layer on the gold leaf. And then I've added some texture with some neon acrylic paint, just to give it to tie it in with the spray paint, and I've spray painted on top. I quit last week.
When I'm looking at it and when I'm hearing it and just looking at the work around me now and then just contrasting it with the sort of designs that you've got, it seems that that's quite an ordered approach in terms of design, and then there's a whole bunch of different energy that goes on.
Oh yeah, it's very different. So like if I'm painting smaller, I think this is why I prefer larger scale painting, because it's like you can let go, it's a bit more messy. I mean, I think I'd describe my style as quite messy, like a lot of character to it, and I think like when you're doing bigger paintings you can let go, it's a bit more like crazy, and then when you're painting on smaller scale it's way more precise, and it's like way more constrained, and I think there is a beauty in that as well, and I do enjoy that. But I think my favourite thing is like almost regressing back to being a child and just throwing paint about.
That's what I'm getting the picture of it. I can sort of visualise. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm visualising there's some music going. There's like just energy. You're moving around the piece, seeing what emerges, and so
exactly. Yeah, I think you can see by the amount of paint that's on the floor and everywhere. It's just a bit of a mess. Yeah, but I do love it. I think part of the fun of creating is making a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. I think some of the best artist studios that I go into, I mean, when I first came here, I said that's the first thing I said. This is a proper artist studio, you know.
Oh, yeah.
When you've got paint on the floor, it's on the walls, there's just stuff everywhere. It's great, and you can see. I mean, I can see one of your easels. Well, what do you call those little things?
It's just this is literally just a piece of scrap cardboard that I've got some oil paints on.
Oh right, yeah, you know, one of those sort of boards that you mix the oils on, and you just get it all over.
I think like I never trust an artist that has a neat studio.
Good tip. Good advice. Let's go back to lockdown and stuff, because obviously before then you were a model. That's a full-time sort of model. I think you still do that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
What's that balance like now, and how have you found the interplay between the two?
Well, I think the art has helped the modelling and the modelling has helped the art. So I think in the modelling world, casting directors and clients are looking for girls or boys that can do something else. So a lot of the time when you're in a casting, you'll walk in and they'll be like, what are your talents? And you'll be like, oh, well, I did ballet when I was 9. Like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of, they want something else. My friend Milky is in a punk band and she's amazing. And she does really well with modelling as well because she's got this added thing. She also skateboards, so it's brilliant. So I've done a lot of artist model campaigns where they book me as a talent, which is a lot of fun. It's adding a bit more flavour to the job as well, because I think like modelling is awesome. I'm really grateful to be able to do it, but sometimes being in someone else's vision and creative vision is quite soul destroying to an extent. But then when you're booked as someone who's a talent, then you have more control over what you're doing, and I feel like personally I have more purpose.
And by talent, what do you mean by that? Is that like you're modelling but you're also doing your artwork, or you're being modelling as part of it? How does that work?
So for example, a brand might interview me as an artist but I'm wearing the clothes of the brand, or a brand will film me painting in a studio and I'll be wearing the clothes, or something like that. So it's just adding another layer, another narrative to their campaign.
I see, yeah. That's that extra dimension that people are interested in. So it's not just about the person and the clothes, it's actually what the person is doing whilst wearing the clothes, you know. I suppose does it in some way go back to this? Because I suppose this is quite interesting, because the work that you do as a model, you're working with brands and you're working and you're advertising those brands. Yet your work quite clearly is subverting a lot of, maybe not the brands that you work with, but sort of more brands from the past. How does that?
You caught me out. You're exposing me here. I think, well, personally, I've always had a love for fashion. Ever since I was a little girl, I was always a girly girl. So I had a very strong connection to the fashion world, and I wanted to be a fashion journalist, actually. When I went to university, that was like the thing that I wanted to be. I wanted to write for Vogue. So working in the fashion world is like an absolute privilege. And I think when brands are using models that are talent, like artists, singers, whatever, I think it's a bit more authentic, because I think previously brands were using models and being like, oh, hold a guitar, and they don't know how to play guitar. At least they're using the talent that actually do the thing that they're pretending to do or doing.
So there's an authenticity that needs to be there then.
Yeah.
You know? So if you're a good example, model holding the guitar, you want them to play the guitar. I suppose that helps with the picture as well.
Exactly, yeah, but I think it's also like adding this another layer of narrative where they're using their platform to promote an artist or a musician, which I think is an awesome thing, and you're adding value to their brand as well by giving them a level of authenticity, I guess. Yeah.
When you look at when you've got your work in the industry, what sort of thing do you hope people will take away from the work that you do? You know, ultimately, as you sit here today, as you reflect on the shows that you've been doing, the journey that you've been on, are there any particular message that you hope people will take away?
Well, I always want my work to evoke a level of nostalgia, whether that's like my dad smoked that brand of cigarettes or, you know, like my nan did, whatever. I think that there's this like kind of sense of longing and nostalgia that comes with a lot of my work. But it is also a level of critique against what is essentially poison, especially like with my Belladonna branding piece. Like, it's this thing that's like, okay, it's beautiful, we're showing you beautiful women, we're showing you models, we're showing you what your life could be if you smoke this brand of cigarettes, but then the underlying message is that it is dangerous for you. And I think there's something quite romantic and interesting to explore within my artwork.
Is there an activist nature to the pieces?
Yeah, I guess so. I think it's more punk. I think it's more like, I know what you're doing.
So a little bit anarchy.
Yeah, I think so.
Are you influenced by music in your work? Does that come, because you mentioned punk there? Is there...
Yeah, massively. I think like I'm really into what I like to call dad music. So anything that was like in the 60s and 70s, I love like the Eagles, the Doors. I mean, like a lot of my friends are in bands and are crushing it. Just in my world pre-art, I was by accident in this kind of world where a lot of people were musicians. So I grew up with my dad being a Queen lover. He loved Queen. So that was, I know the CD, Queen's best hits back to back. I know which songs come in next. Like, yeah, I think I'm definitely a music lover, and I think a little bit of that rock and roll energy is translated within my work.
Charlotte, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really nice to talk to you.
If you enjoyed this episode of Art Related Noise, please subscribe and you'll be the first in line to hear some of our art-related interviews.